My parents gave my sister a car garage home for her self-care journey. She's been through so much, Mom sobbed. I got a storage locker with old yearbooks. Memories are enough for you, Dad said. But they didn't know who bought that land. You're so lucky, Celeste said, twirling her crystal necklace as she sipped oat milk chai on the deck of her new garage home. Lucky? I raised an eyebrow. You don't need anything. You're, like, grounded. It's a gift. You got an entire property and a brand new house. It's not a house, it's a spiritual container. And I'm healing. Mom and Dad said I deserve this. And I got a storage locker full of moldy photo albums. She gave me a serene smile. Well, memories are enough for some people. She had no idea what I had already done. I'm 41. My name is Marla. I work in social work, based out of Asheville, North Carolina, but I grew up just west of town in Candler, the kind of place where people still wave at each other on back roads but avoid emotional honesty like the plague. My sister Celeste is 36. If you looked at our social media profiles, you'd think she was the enlightened one. She has this effortless way of talking like every sentence is a quote from a yoga retreat. She's always posting things like, if your root chakra is silent, your life will be too. She's never held a job longer than 6 months but somehow always lands on her feet. Probably because my parents keep putting pillows under them. 3 years ago, after my divorce, amicable, uneventful, boring really, I came back to town temporarily. I rented a place in West Asheville while I figured out my next steps. That's when my parents announced they were retiring and simplifying. They didn't say what that meant at the time. Then one afternoon I got a call. Hey, we're having a little ceremony for Celeste's new place this weekend, Mom said. You'll be there, right? New place? Oh yes, the garage home. We're so proud of her. She's finally getting space to heal. I assumed she was renting a studio or something. No. My parents had cleared out the far end of the property where our childhood swing set used to be and built her a full-blown modern garage house, concrete foundation, tall windows, Scandinavian wood inside, designer appliances, the works. It was sleek, minimal, and clearly expensive. They deeded her the acre and a half it sat on. They paid for the build. Gave her a new car to help her get out into nature more. I found out they took out part of their retirement savings to do it. She's been through so much, Mom told me that day, brushing her hand across Celeste's shoulder as if she were a wounded bird. Celeste just stood there in flowing linen pants and a head wrap she probably bought from an Etsy store labeled Earthchild vibration threads. She gave a little closed-lip smile, the kind that people give when they're used to getting their way through other people's guilt. I stood there on the gravel path, watching all of this happen like I wasn't even in the scene. Just some background extra in my own family. Later, after the mini blessing ceremony, Mom pulled me aside behind the converted garage home turned healing container. We packed up your things, she said. What things? I asked. You know, old stuff from your room. We needed the space to clear out the main house so we could list it. Wait, what? You're selling the house? We already did, she said like it was the most casual thing. The buyers are coming next week to finalize. I felt it in my gut, like someone kicked the air right out of me. That house wasn't perfect, but it was still home. The only home that felt mine. And it wasn't just sold, it had been erased from the conversation like it never mattered. We couldn't keep it forever, Marla. And it didn't seem fair to Celeste. She needs roots, somewhere to grow from. She's trying so hard. So where are my things? Storage, she said. Just until you come pick them up. They rented a storage unit in town, and didn't even offer to help me move anything out. When I drove there later that week, the unit was hot and dusty, and my entire childhood had been reduced to 2 cardboard boxes. A few yearbooks, one of my old medals from high school debate, some loose photo albums, and a baby blanket in a plastic bin. The way Dad said it when I confronted him later, memories are enough for you, Marla. You've always had a strong head on your shoulders. Strong head. What he really meant was, you don't cause us problems. I don't ask for money. I don't cry in public. I don't show up in their driveway with a wellness breakdown and a GoFundMe link. Celeste did that, twice. But I guess tears get you land deeds. Quiet resilience gets you leftover bins. I tried not to stew about it. I told myself they were older, maybe not thinking clearly. Maybe they were just trying to make things right in their own flawed way. Maybe they thought I'd understand. But I couldn't forget how small they made me feel that day. Like I was just this satellite spinning quietly around the emotional black hole that was Celeste. A few months after the house was sold, I found out who bought it, a landscaping company. They bulldozed it, scraped the yard down to gravel, and parked their work trucks where our porch swing used to be. All those birthday parties, the little Christmas tree Dad planted when I was 9, Mom's roses, gone. Gone for good. Celeste posted about it online like it was a spiritual tragedy. She sat cross-legged on her deck, filming herself crying softly with captions like, "We must sometimes watch the old world burn so we can rise in our truth." But she didn't lose anything. She still had her brand new house. Her deck. Her yoga mats and sacred incense station. Her wellness altar with the same stolen rocks from the Blue Ridge Parkway she once tried to sell as activated crystals. What stung more than anything was how serene she was. Like the chaos didn't even touch her. Or maybe, more accurately, like the chaos was her natural climate and the rest of us just had to adjust our barometers. I tried putting some distance between us. I stopped going to family circle brunch at her place, where she'd make fermented oats and play meditation music at full volume. I declined when she invited me to one of her women's circles, a 3-hour event called Sacred Surrender in the Shadows. You can't make that up. I went back to work. Picked up more hours at the women's center. Did what I could to forget the whole thing. But it lingered, not just the insult of it, but the way it confirmed what I had always suspected, that in our family, love wasn't about who you were. It was about how much work you made for other people. Celeste made everything hard. So she got everything handed to her. I made everything easy. So I got told, "You're so lucky to be strong." It wore on me in a slow, simmering way, like walking around with a pebble in your shoe for months until one day your heel's bleeding and you can't remember when it started. Then something happened. It started with a random conversation at the nonprofit where I work. A colleague mentioned that the land behind Celeste's was up for sale. It had belonged to an old couple, the Wagners, who had passed away within 6 months of each other. Their property had gone into probate and was finally being cleared. 6 acres of it, directly bordering Celeste's sanctuary. At first I didn't think anything of it. But it lingered in my mind. Something about the idea of that land, those woods, all of it sitting untouched, waiting. Waiting for someone to see it. I don't know what made me take that next step, but I reached out to the real estate attorney handling the sale. Just to inquire, I told myself. Then I found myself scheduling a walk of the property. Then I made an offer, through an LLC I set up for privacy. Part of me still didn't believe I was actually doing it. The process took a few months. It was tied up in paperwork, back and forths, title issues, negotiations. I never told anyone. When it was finalized, I drove out there and stood under the trees alone. I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even thinking about revenge. I just wanted something to be mine. Something untouched by my family's chaos. Something not handed to me as a consolation prize, or dropped into my lap like an afterthought. It felt different. It felt earned. So I started planning. Not out of spite, not really. But I knew what I wanted to do with the land, and I knew exactly who it would affect. And I was okay with that. I started small. A privacy fence first, the kind that's technically legal but still feels aggressive. 9 feet tall, cedar planks, with climbing ivy planned along the inside. The landscapers were local, discreet, and didn't ask questions. I told them it was for noise and spiritual privacy, which they seemed to find funny but didn't press. The fence went up along the eastern and southern borders of the property, which, if you looked at a map, meant one thing: Celeste's healing sanctuary was now boxed in on 2 sides by tall, raw wood that blocked her sweeping mountain view, the one she used as a backdrop for her live streams and retreat promos. I wasn't trying to suffocate her. She still had her front yard open, her driveway clear. But I wanted her to feel it, the sense that someone else was there now. That she didn't own the landscape. That the narrative she'd built, where she was the divine guardian of inherited ancestral space, was no longer complete. A week after the fence went up, Mom called. "Celeste is distraught," she said, her voice low and tense, like she was relaying news about a car accident. "She says there's a fence around her energy space. That she can't breathe spiritually." "She can breathe just fine," I said. She feels caged, Marla. She's not. Her driveway is open. Her house is untouched. But why would someone put up such an ugly fence? Maybe they want privacy. Mom was silent for a beat. Did you buy that land? I don't know what you're talking about. Another pause. She says she can't see the sunrise anymore. Sun rises in the east. If her sacred energy depends on watching it rise over the property she doesn't own, that's her problem. There was a longer silence, and then the classic pivot, you used to be such a good sister. I didn't respond. Because I am a good sister. I just stopped playing the role they cast me in, the one where I keep the peace while they hand Celeste the world. Not long after that, Celeste made a post on Instagram that I knew was aimed at me. Even if she didn't say my name, some people try to dim your light with their shadows. But remember, fences rot, and the soul endures. She stood barefoot in front of her sage bundle, her head tilted back toward the one slice of sky she still had a view of. The comments were full of "OMG, stay strong" and "Your light is so needed right now." She posted a GoFundMe that night, asking for donations to help her expand the sanctuary by buying back sacred ground lost to energy colonization. She raised $126. I wish I could say that satisfied something in me. It didn't. It wasn't about watching her lose. It was about finally seeing things settle in their rightful places. The land behind our childhood home wasn't sacred. It wasn't ancestral. It was an opportunity. And this time, it came to me. Still, I didn't stop with the fence. I poured most of my savings, and a portion of my inheritance from my late grandmother, the one who always quietly favored me, into the next phase. I didn't want a sanctuary. I wanted a center. A real one. Not a curated space for Instagram filters, but an actual wellness and recovery retreat. Grounded, trauma-informed, with licensed therapists and programs that had actual merit. I didn't want to mimic Celeste, I wanted to build what she only pretended to have. I called it the rooted path. It wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be. A small, beautifully built timber frame with wide windows, soft lighting, meditation rooms with real soundproofing. One wing was a studio space for yoga and movement therapy, the other, a private office wing for one-on-one counseling. We hired staff slowly, carefully. People with credentials. People who didn't need to call themselves energy shamans. We opened with a few clients. Word spread. Within 6 months, we had a waiting list. Celeste lost her mind. She showed up unannounced one morning, barefoot, hair wild, wearing what looked like a drape from Pier 1 wrapped around her shoulders. She stood at the edge of the parking circle, yelling to one of our clients as they walked out, "This isn't medicine. This is a strip mall version of spirit." Our receptionist called the sheriff. Celeste left before anyone showed up, but not before recording a long, weepy video where she called me a colonial force of spiritual gentrification and a textbook narcissist with a therapist complex. I watched it twice. Not because I was angry. But because it finally occurred to me how much performance ruled her life. Everything she did was a stage. She wasn't even trying to heal, she was trying to appear like she was healing. And when the audience stopped clapping, she unraveled. Mom called again. She's not doing well. I'm sure she isn't. Why are you doing this to her? To her? I laughed. She got the house. The car. The land. You gave her a whole world. You had your own life. We didn't think you needed anything. I let that hang in the air for a moment. You didn't think I needed anything. That was it, wasn't it? They looked at me and saw someone who didn't demand, didn't cry, didn't threaten. So they gave me nothing. Because I was quiet. Because I didn't make their lives harder. Because I didn't cost them anything. And now, I have created something on my own. Not from a trust fund or a construction loan bankrolled by Dad. But with what I earned. With what they never gave me. Celeste never came to the rooted path again. Her bookings on Airbnb dropped. Her page slowed down. Eventually she started traveling more, 1 month in Arizona, another in Bali. She told her followers she was on an inner pilgrimage. She never mentioned the fence again. Never mentioned the way her once clear vista now stared directly into a thriving, client-filled healing center. Never mentioned that her older sister now owned the very land she once claimed was part of her divine inheritance. But I saw it in her eyes the last time we passed each other on the edge of the property. The realization. The shift. For once, I wasn't orbiting her. She was the one spinning. It wasn't revenge. Not really. It didn't feel like the stuff you see in movies, some satisfying mic drop or final scene where the villain crumbles in defeat. What it felt like was balance. A slow, silent leveling. I never made an announcement about owning the land. Never flaunted it. If people asked, I told them the truth, but most didn't. Clients at the Rooted Path didn't care about local drama, they cared about healing, about quiet, about a space where they could breathe again without judgment. And that's what we gave them. Ironically, everything Celeste claimed to be creating, we actually built. I think that's what hurt her most, not the land, not the fence, not the view. But the fact that people stopped treating her like the sacred vessel of their recovery. They stopped buying into the story she'd sold so well for so long, that pain, when dressed up in incense and flowing white clothes, somehow meant wisdom. It didn't. It just meant pain. And eventually, people moved on from it. By the second spring of the Rooted Path being open, we had expanded into small group workshops, journaling retreats, grief processing, even divorce recovery weekends. One of our most popular facilitators was a woman named Alma, a licensed trauma counselor who had herself walked away from a toxic spiritual community in California. She and I shared a lot of late-night office chats, mostly about the way healing had become a kind of performance for some people. Unprocessed pain, she said once, can be addictive. Some people don't want to get better. They want to stay broken because being broken gets them attention. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She saw it in my eyes. Around that same time, Celeste's garage home started showing up with 4 rent signs, first for weekend retreats, then longer sabbaticals. She wasn't staying there much anymore. She said she was called to the desert. I think she meant Arizona, but honestly, who knows? She rarely stayed in one place for long. Always chasing the next new modality. Always trying to find herself through other people's ceremonies. I got an email from my mother that summer. No subject line. Just a few short lines. I heard from Carol that you're running some kind of center on that land. Is it safe? Do you need money? Are you okay? I didn't answer. Not because I wanted to be cruel. But because I knew that question, are you okay? Wasn't really about me. It was her trying to understand how I'd done something without needing her. And that confused her. That challenged the story she'd written. See, my parents raised us to believe we had to earn affection, Celeste through chaos, me through silence. But the truth is, love shouldn't be something you negotiate. Or budget. Or give out in reaction to someone else's meltdown. Love should notice you, even when you're not screaming. But that kind of love was never in our house. After Mom's email, she didn't reach out again. Not directly. But I saw them in town once, her and Dad, outside the Ingalls on Sandhill Road. They were older. Smaller than I remembered. Something about seeing them like that, just 2 retired people buying groceries, doing normal things, made the years fall away in a strange, almost aching way. They didn't see me. Or if they did, they didn't show it. I could have walked up to them. Said hi. Asked about the weather, the grandkids they didn't have, the arthritis Dad had always joked about. But I didn't. I got in my car. I drove back to the center. I had a meeting scheduled, a check-in with a woman named Bianca who was staying at the retreat for the second time. She was in her 50s, soft-spoken, recently divorced after 26 years of marriage. She said being here felt like being seen in a way my own house never allowed. She didn't know my story. She didn't know that the woman who ran this peaceful retreat had once been handed 2 cardboard boxes while her sister got an entire life. She didn't need to know. What mattered was this space, this land, was now holding her in a way our childhood home never held me. Celeste's garage home still stood across the hedged barrier. Every now and then, a new car would appear in her driveway, some retreat guest or interim renter. The house itself was still beautiful, but it felt hollow now. Like a well-designed stage with no performance left to give. I passed it once while out on a walk with a client, a gentle young woman in recovery from postpartum depression. She paused when she saw it through the slats of the cedar fencing. That place looks sad, she said quietly. I didn't say anything. Because she wasn't wrong. Celeste had spent years trying to fill herself with the illusion of healing. But healing doesn't come from burning sage or buying crystals. It doesn't come from curated grief or public breakdowns. It comes from standing in the middle of your own pain and saying, I'm still here. And I was. Still here. Rooted. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't looking for anyone else to see me. It wasn't until the third year of the rooted path being open that I got the letter. It came in a soft cream-colored envelope with Celeste's loopy handwriting on the front. No return address. No stamp, she must have dropped it off herself. Inside was a single sheet of handmade paper, flecked with dried petals. She always had a flair for theatrics. Marla, I'm sure you think you've won. But I've decided to release my attachment to all this. The land, the energy, the family wounds. I'm moving west, for real this time. I need to be in a place where people vibrate higher. Maybe you can have peace now. If that's what you wanted. Celeste P.S. There's still mold in the back corner of the garage. Just in case your clients start complaining. I read it once. Then I folded it carefully and put it in my desk drawer, not out of sentimentality, but because I knew it would come in handy someday. The next month, I got an email from her old Airbnb profile manager. Apparently, Celeste had gifted the garage home to a friend, some wellness coach who ghosted after 3 weeks and left the place in chaos, unpaid bills, unreturned bookings, garbage on the deck. It sat empty after that. And then came the for sale sign. I didn't need to think twice. I called my lawyer. We made an offer through the same LLC that had bought the neighboring land. The asking price was high, not because the property had any actual value left, but because Celeste still thought it was sacred ground. She figured some naive healer would buy it and let her crash there when she wandered back east. But no one bit. Not for months. The market softened. She got desperate. Lowered the price. Eventually, I got it for 60% of her original ask. I never told her. When the papers were finalized, I went out there one morning by myself and walked through the place. It was quiet. Echoey. Her crystals were gone, but the stains from her old incense burners were still on the shelves. Her vision boards, all curled at the corners, were still tacked up in one of the bedrooms. Photos of smiling women sitting cross-legged on colorful mats. A printed-out quote on the bathroom mirror, "Be your own sanctuary." I smiled. Not because I was gloating, but because it felt like something had come full circle. They gave her this house. They gave me a storage locker. And now? I owned both. I didn't demolish it. That would have been petty. Instead, I turned the garage home into transitional housing for women leaving emotionally manipulative relationships. It wasn't luxurious anymore. We stripped it down, sanitized the branding, gave it neutral paint and soft, clean bedding. Each guest stayed no more than 3 months. It was a halfway place, between the chaos they left and the peace they were building. The irony never stopped amusing me. Celeste's former sanctuary now housed the women she used to pretend she was helping. Even better? The fence stayed up. We planted wisteria along the southern wall. By the next spring, it bloomed in waterfalls of purple. Clients would sit out front on the little stone patio with mugs of tea, not even realizing this used to be the stage for someone's spiritual cosplay. And as for my parents? They moved to a condo outside Naples, Florida. I still got the occasional birthday card, and signed, generic, a bit like a formality they couldn't let go of. Once, I received an email from Dad, "Hope things are going okay at the center. We saw your retreat featured in a magazine. Looks like you've really built something special." I didn't reply. Not because I was angry anymore. I just didn't feel like performing gratitude for people who had only ever seen me as self-sufficient, and therefore, invisible. But I kept the email. Just like I kept Celeste's letter. Every so often, I reread them both. Not out of nostalgia. But because they remind me of how far I've come, and how far someone can rise when no one hands them a damn thing. The Rooted Path now runs year-round. We offer scholarships, support groups, trauma healing workshops, even vocational training. The women who come through our doors have changed, not because we gave them magic, but because we gave them space to finally hear themselves think. That's what real healing is. Not incense. Not a crystal grid. Just a place to remember who you were before people made you forget. Celeste? She's somewhere out west. Last I heard, she was trying to build an intentional commune outside Santa Fe. She posted a picture on Instagram a few months back, smiling in front of a yurt, talking about finally finding her people. She doesn't know who bought her old house. She doesn't need to. I don't need to say anything. Because the land says it all now. It speaks in morning stillness, in the sound of breath returning to a body, in the quiet victory of a woman sitting on the front steps of her own place, knowing she was never the problem, just the one they underestimated. And that, to me, is the best kind of revenge there is.